And you are now live.
Okay, this is Senate Appropriations, and we're continuing our work on the FY 2022 budget. And we have not finished all the language. We ended up on Friday afternoon, so we want to finish that out. And then we're going to have to start having some discussion about requests and how we want to make some decisions around or at least have some discussions about the bills that are going to be influencing the bill of the budget as we finish it up. And I think perhaps that's something that Stephanie can help us with, because the work of other committees is really going to come in on us in the last couple of days. I think the other, obviously the other dimension here at work is even we have made a commitment. We will try, we not only will try, we will look at all the requests, but this is ARPA is 3 years, and we want to make sure that we are looking at giving ourselves time to really think about how this money should be spent, what the long-term investments should be. And I realize that everyone who would like to have some funding is anxious for us to make a decision, but I'm not sure that we're going to be able to begin to meet all the expectations that seem to be coming our way. But we will do our best to see what needs more immediate action. There are many things that we know from the CRF money based on experience. We end up moving around because it wasn't needed in quite the same way. I know that there's, we're hearing, and I've had a number of requests, you know, an earmark for my program or my project or whatever. And I think we just need to be very clear that we appropriate through the entities that are in the budget, who then in turn can either set up a process for grant applications or some disbursement mechanism. But that is how we appropriate the money, through administering agencies of state government. So I've had emails from saying, we want to do something on our building. You know, how do I get ARPA money? And so that's going to be those decisions and that level of specificity are yet to be defined, and will be defined in terms of how we allocate into the different categories of spending and what agencies of state government we move that money to. So I just know that everybody's getting emails, and any that I've gotten, I've tried to send out to, I have had Chrissy send out to the committee so people are aware of where the requests are coming from. So with that, I'm going to have Stephanie pick us up on the language where we left off. And Chrissy, did you send us a link today?
I did. I sent you a document, about 12:45. Let me get the exact time with the House Pass version attached, right?
12:40, yeah.
Great.
Okay, so we'll go to the House one-time list.
Well,
not the one-time list.
We want the as-passed bill.
No, I'm sorry, that's what I mean. I'm clicking on the as-passed bill. And so what page did we get to, Stephanie?
You got to page 159. You got through education, and now we're at higher ed. And so we're starting with UVM, E600.
Okay. I'm still scrolling through to get to.
Yeah, if you're in it's got that little magnifying glass. If you click that and then just type in E600, it'll be right. It'll bring you E.600. It'll bring you right there.
Magnifying glass. Oh, okay.
Top left-hand corner.
Yeah. What do I do?
It should open a little dialog box when you click on the magnifier so that you can search.
I'm not getting anything.
Okay, then you'll have to scroll, and it's about more than 3/4 of the way.
Well, you can use the slide bar. You use the slide bar on the right-hand side. Should be on the right-hand side.
Well, I don't know. Just, has everybody else got the document?
Yeah.
Alice, you have it?
I can't find it, but I have the paper one that I've been working off of. Where is it?
159.
Yeah, I've got the page and everything. I have the right page.
Okay, everybody's all set then?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
This,
Madam Chair,
yes, this is the language right now. This is not dealing with any of the ARPA.
right.
This is
This
the
section-
language.
Yeah. Is a pretty standard. We have the A section in that has the grant paid out in, 1/12 portions throughout the state, throughout the fiscal year. And then the EPSCOR piece is always identified within that grant. That's what's happening in each 600. This is very standard. It's in every year around the base UVM grant.
So that's standard language in terms of how the disbursement works. And then we've got the EPSCOR funding and then for UVM. So that's standard.
Yeah.
Okay. Then, so unless there's some reason to change it, that's the way in which the disbursement, and we've been funding EPSCOR for a number of years. Is that, so that, as it says, for match requirements for available federal funds or both. You all okay with that?
Fine.
We've been doing this for
Yeah.
20
So
years.
we'll keep going on that. State colleges,
I
this is
do-
VMAC, which
Oh,
we've
okay.
also funded. I think that's in Randolph. For complying, and once again, that's for federal match or private funds or both, and that's been standard. I don't think the amount's changed at all, has it, Stephanie?
No, I don't think either EPSCOR or VMAC has changed. I think the last time they changed was probably 10 or 11 years ago.
Okay, so that's something that we've been doing to support those two entities. Okay, here's 160. Is this where Senator Baruth, you had
Actually, I have a question first about section 602.1.
okay.
Property,
I'm sorry. Okay,
property
I'm sorry.
transactions.
Yeah,
So what this says is it has to conform to a piece of, I was thinking it was a reference to the enabling statutes for the state college, which say that any sale or transfer or demolition or lease has to go through the legislature. And the state colleges have asked, in light of the transformation we've been talking about, they've asked for the freedom to be able to lease without going through the legislature. So at first I thought it was doing something like that, but once I looked at 32 VSA 962, I was very confused. So I had a question for Stephanie. Stephanie, do you remember why this piece was put in?
I don't know exactly. My understanding was that there's the potential that they could be seeking to divest of property in their transformation, and
Right.
just
And-
making it consistent
And
with that.
I think they're already, what it says is if they receive an appropriation that's produced through, I forget the mechanism, through a certain mechanism, then they have to go through X process. But I'd like to hold that open if we
okay,
could
all right.
and get more information. But also, Madam Chair, I was hoping to pose the question of, could we change the VSC enabling statute to allow them to lease without going through us? Because it seems like if we want them to be in the business of making public-private partnerships to use space on the campus, having to have a bill move all the way through the process and get signed by the governor is the worst way to do business. So I would propose that as a question when we hold it open.
All right, we can hold it open. And And I think there's been a lot of discussion how they could be a little bit more entrepreneurial in the use of their property to generate income. So
Yeah, I wouldn't
you-
want
you-
them to demolish or sell without us saying so. But in terms of a lease,
uh-huh,
you know,
okay. Who's the best person to look at that? Is that Jim Demaray? Or no, or what-
Becky Wasserman,
Betty,
probably.
because of
Well,
state property.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so we'll look at the underlying statute and see if it's an amendment to the statute or notwithstanding that you're looking for.
Yeah.
What the best
Yeah.
approach is around the lease, it
Yeah.
might be.
I'm thinking notwithstanding might be easier, but
Yeah.
we'll see.
But it might be, if leasing is just a strikeout of that particular activity and leaving the rest of the statute, that's
Yeah.
straightforward, but I'll ask Becky to look at that.
All
okay.
right. Yeah, thank you for picking up that, Phil, because I know that was part of the discussion is how to,
Yeah,
they've got a larger footprint than they probably need with their enrollment. So what they do with those properties and how to think about income generation. So leasing is an obvious one.
yeah,
So let's see what we can do. So we're not putting obstacles in the way, because if you're leasing, you got to be nimble. And if someone's interested, you can't say, well, we've got this elaborate process that has to go through. Okay. So we'll hold that one open and then move on. I'm sorry, I actually scrolled down, so I missed it. So thank you for.
sure. And then the E602.2, as I said, I have some suggested language changes. Would you like me to just read them to Stephanie? Or
Are they substantive or are they just more editorial?
there are a couple of places where I'm popping one sentence out and putting another sentence in,
Okay.
and then there are
Well,
a couple of corrections.
Is it a long list, Philip, or we can do it right now?
Yeah, it wouldn't take a long time.
Okay, why don't you, since we're in this section, why don't we
Okay.
run
right.
through them and,
Yeah, sounds good. So the first one is in the first subsection A.
Mhm.
I would like to insert the word unified so fully unified and integrated, because for the select committee, unification was the preferred term,
Okay.
and integrated doesn't necessarily mean that they would be unified. So I'd like it to read fully unified and integrated.
Okay.
Stephanie, are you picking
I'm
it?
taking-
Okay.
Mhm.
And then the next one is,
So we wouldn't want it to be unified and not integrated?
I would, unified is what I'm putting my money on.
Mhm.
I was trying to be respectful of Representative Fagan's choice of integrated there. But at your pleasure, the only thing I think should be there is unified.
I think that's probably right, since the board has actually voted to do so.
Yeah,
Okay.
This is just, could I just get clarification? So this is all of the state colleges?
Yeah. mhm.
yes.
VTC
It-
and
To
Castleton?
make it a unified system, so it includes all the campuses, all the.
Doesn't include
components,
CCV.
Except, right, all the, campuses, which they don't really have a
Main campus.
sort of,
Yeah,
Right.
but no, this is not CCV. The Select Study Committee was very conscious about setting that part of the system.
Yeah.
Setting it on its own. Okay, so we'll make it unified. My question is, do you need integrated or the extent to which unified is really embodies? All right,
let's just swap out one for the other.
I think I like that better.
Okay. And then moving down,
Mrs. Slocum,
Mrs. Slocum. What?
Mrs. Slocum, I was trying to remember that. Yes.
Who's Mrs. Slocum?
well, remember my quote about someone who said, and I am unanimous in this?
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
And
Mrs. Slocum.
we were struggling with who that character was in a British comedy series. And it was Mrs. Slocum and Are You Being Served?
Exactly.
And I just had a flash.
I woke up
So-
this morning, and as I was laying there, my thoughts drifted
No,
to
you were
Green,
lying there, Philip.
lying there. my thoughts drifted to Green Acres, and all of
Uh-huh.
a sudden, all of the names of the characters popped into my head, which is and Petticoat Junction, that whole universe.
I'm
Um,
sorry.
So,
I'm
anyways,
so sorry.
let's
Oh,
let's
well, okay, now
back
that
to our
we've,
muttons.
now we've sort of reminisced on old shows, your next suggested change.
Okay, so if you go down to, it says, hang on one second. It says something about,
Is a lot of this lifted from the report? It's all
some
aligned?
of it.
Mhm.
Okay, so this is A2, accessibility. It says, ensure that each VSC student has a supported educational pathway to meet the student's educational goals. That's really vague language, and it isn't really what we talked about when we talked about accessibility. We were talking about making sure that students were not barred by geography from being able to access majors and courses that they wanted.
Mhm.
So I'd like to pop that sentence out and put in, ensure that each VSC student has equal access to educational opportunities within the system, regardless of geographical considerations.
What does that read?
Did you get that, Stephanie?
What does that tie them to? I mean,
In other words, it ties them to making what they've promised, which is that they will be able to offer all the majors that are on offer within the system to any student, regardless of which campus they base at. So through remote delivery and other means, they're saying that they'll be able to access without having to go live residentially at Castleton or NVU.
I'm not sure your set replacement sentence, to me, it was sort of like much broader than that. So if I lived in Bennington or Brattleboro, and I mean, it was sort of like somehow that there would be accommodation for where I live, as opposed to what is my primary campus.
Oh, well, we could say has access,
Mhm.
as opposed to equal access, which maybe is hitting it too hard.
Regardless of the geographical location of the camp, of the,
I'm really wanted to know, do you want to make it specific? Because your explanation really put it in a different context. And it was access regardless of what state college, I mean, you're attending. So it's access within the Vermont State College system would be equally accessible regardless of which, whether you're at VTC, Castleton, or whatever. So
Yep.
I think your sentence, the way you originally wrote it, could be confusing because we're struggling with what you're saying.
Okay, so
And just a minute, Alice, and then we'll.
I had ensure that each VSC student has access to educational opportunities within the system, regardless of geographical considerations, or regardless of campus.
Yeah, which college they're attending.
Yeah.
Something like. Alice, you had a comment?
Yes, I'm wondering, how does that work in terms of some campuses that have, for instance, at what is formerly Linden, where they have the weather program? I mean, isn't there a lot of equipment and hands-on experience that you have there? And also some of the courses at VTC. So how are you ensuring equal access when someone can only do an online course and not do the labs?
Yeah, so that's we talked about that in the select committee. There are some aspects of it that would be practicums, basically, where you'd have to go there for a certain amount of time to complete those. But theoretically, you could be doing classwork. In other words, you wouldn't have to go there for every class. You could do a certain amount of it in a smaller time on that campus.
Well, that certainly should be the case, but I'm not sure this sentence covers that. It sounds like it would mean equal access to,
Well, I was trying not to get
well,
too into the weeds because this is a
I'm
sort
going to
of a mission
suggest, Phil,
statement.
that we just hold that one open and maybe we can think about,
Okay,
based on comments, if there's a way of writing it, so that we don't want to create the impression that particularly where VTC has got some allied health programs or dental, that kind of thing.
yeah,
That create the impression that there
okay,
would be multiple sites for programs that really require, as Alice is pointing out, specialized equipment, or it's available only in one place within, and it's much more, as you say, practice. It's really the hands-on piece.
yeah, think
So-
about the airplane mechanic one.
Yeah.
That's not available.
well,
Many.
I think their point is they want to be delivering they want to get out of the business of selling each program as a residential program and get into the business of trying to sell each program across the system. There's going to be some obvious sticking points with physical training models and things like that.
Okay, we should hold it, as Jane said. And
Okay,
address those.
We can maybe we can come up with a creative way of expressing the intent, but not creating the impression or the obligation that we are going to be replicating some of these very expensive labs, or when you're dealing with a dental program, for example.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We'll hold that and move on to, so 2, accessibility is being rewritten.
yeah.
Okay.
And then I wanted to see. So down a ways on the next page.
This is very
116.
lofty language, isn't it? Like any institution that would say they could ensure each student is prepared for lifelong career and personal
Yeah.
success is really,
Yeah, I mean,
it's very aspirational. That's all I can say.
it's aspirational. So on the next page, that is page 161, on toward the bottom under 3, it says VSC shall maintain its present campus locations as educational student support centers, recognizing that changes in governance and operational structures as well as program and service offerings may change as circumstances require. So first of all, it has change in there twice, changes may change. So I would get rid of changes in sentence 2, so that it would say recognizing that governance and operational structures as well as program and service offerings may change as circumstances require. But then the other thing is, before governance, I would put in overall size, comma, governance and operational structures, because it could be read now as saying that they have to maintain the campus in its current size. And what we've asked them to do elsewhere is to structurally reduce their footprint and their budget by $5 million a year. So what they're going to be doing is maintaining an educational and student service center in all of these locations. But I think inevitably, one or more of them may be smaller than they are today. So if
But
we
it doesn't say that, to me, even if you had some downsizing and
Yep.
whatever, that doesn't violate maintain. It's just
Well-
a change. I think they basically is saying you won't close any campuses. Isn't that the,
It is,
Um,
but then it says changes in governance and operational structures and program and service offerings may change. But I foresee a situation where the Board of Trustees says that they're getting rid of a dorm and knocking down some other building, and people feel like they're violating the spirit of this because they're not maintaining the campus. There were people who were making those arguments when Jeb first proposed the the closure of the campuses. So I think if we put overall size there, we're again just making it clear that they may wind up with a slightly smaller campus.
So you're talking about operational structures as well as program service off and overall size may change.
Yes, I would
Okay.
put overall size first.
Okay.
Changes in overall size, comma, governance and operational structures, as well as program and service offerings may change.
Because we have talked about downsizing
Right.
of certain areas.
And reducing the footprint, and that
Yeah.
that seems to me to allow an argument that we're talking out of both sides of our mouth.
Okay, people all right with making it clear that the campuses might shrink, programs might be limited to one campus and provided through technology or whatever. But I think that was very much part of the that we're carrying too much infrastructure and too much system for today. So we'll
Yeah.
just add overall size to that sentence.
Yeah, and
Can
then,
we- Can we,
And get rid of the duplicate change.
yeah,
All right,
Bill?
Becca?
I'm just trying to follow all the different pieces here. Phil, as you understand it, how would it read at this point?
so it would say, one second,
Yeah.
I moved to another section. Where was that one again? Oh, okay. VSC shall maintain its present campus locations as educational and student support centers, recognizing that changes in overall size, governance, and operational structures, as well as program and service offerings, may change as circumstances require.
Okay,
I'm good with that.
yeah, that flows well.
Okay.
Uh,
And then the only other piece that I think is in need of change is, after talking with VSC, their team and the chancellor, they worked on this with Representative Fagan, and they are okay with every element of it except for one. And that is, there's a couple of places in here where, like on the bottom of 164, there's two places. One is 164. So if you look at 10 on 164, it says, the chancellor shall demonstrate the status with trends and relevant industry benchmark information. That phrase with benchmark information is used twice, and they're leery of that because one of the things they found with the select committee was that they spent a lot of their time putting together benchmark information from other states, and state college system doesn't have any problem with providing all the information about their system, but they would prefer not to be locked into constantly documenting and updating the benchmarks around the country. So they would like to eliminate that last sentence in 10, if that makes sense. And then 2 pages earlier, there's,
you don't really have, I guess you don't need to worry about parallel construction, but it seems like 10 should mean the chancellor shall report and then go into, or shall provide a deficit reduction plan, or shall report the deficit reduction progress on the deficit reduction plan. It's something along that line. It's I think all the other ones are instructive about the role, to ensure, no, maybe not, but I don't know, it seems regarding the deficit reduction plan.
yeah,
Is there a definition of reduction plan any other place?
there is, there's a requirement that they reduce the structural deficit by 5 million a year.
Uh-huh.
And that's laid out in this section.
Okay.
And they have to have a plan, and then they have to report what they did to reduce to reduce that deficit each year when they do their budget presentation.
Okay.
But if
Well-
if we eliminate that last sentence, the chancellor shall demonstrate the status with trends and relevant industry benchmark information.
I don't even know what it means, shall demonstrate the state.
Well, it just seems like a flourish, like we want
It's
you to,
gratuitous language.
I guess it is, yes.
I would take it out.
Okay.
And then up above, 2 pages earlier, on page 162, under E, it asks for their enrollment statistics. And again, then it says with relevant industry benchmarks. So I would like to just get rid of with relevant industry benchmarks and keep enrollment statistics that pertain to the student enrollment efforts, blah, blah, blah. So in other words, eliminating what is a phrase, but will be for them weeks of work unrelated to what they're doing, but just sort of documenting national trends. Does that make sense, Jane?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I guess what we're really measuring is their progress against their own plan, not the rest
Exactly.
of the world.
Exactly. And
Although I suppose from a perspective, it's like understanding that the forces at work that are creating some of the pressures for our state college system aren't unique to them. It's the larger world. We have fewer students, et cetera. Or there's a significant shift in the kind of courses that students are taking or not taking. So,
and I think they'll always use touchstones to make their presentation, but this locks them into kind of a
okay.
Providing an authoritative take on the national benchmarks each year.
What about D also?
D.
Just above?
Yeah, I would.
But those
get rid
aren't
of-
industry or they aren't national. It could be against their own benchmarks,
Yeah.
Mm.
Why
which
don't-
one
well, we
would
could
think you would have. I mean, as you're moving forward in any transformation, that gets into part of what we were talking about is how do we, on a routine basis, get information that gives us confidence that progress is being made and that the system is getting stabilized. So,
Yeah, I think they distinguished below with industry benchmarks.
yeah, I think
Um,
that's probably what.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what industry, I guess probably there is a set segment that they do for state colleges, because obviously industry is pretty broad from Princeton to Harvard to,
Mhm.
I don't know, to VTC.
Right.
Rich, you had a comment.
So this goes on forever into the future, correct?
Well, until we tell them to stop, I think.
Yeah, it's open-ended, so it goes on forever into the future.
Well, the money one is a 5-year one whereby they reduce their spending by.
This at the beginning of this section says, beginning in fiscal year 22, the Board of Trustees through the designee shall report to the House committees and blah, blah, blah through all of this. So this goes on forever.
Well, it should be then, if we're talking about develop and implement a 10-year strategic plan,
Maybe
You
date
wanna-
it to 10 years.
align and sunset this requirement.
Yes,
Okay.
Good idea.
I want to align and sunset the requirement. I just say this is just me, but because, and particularly when I get into the out years,
I'll be
when
right
they
back.
talk about deficit reduction and then generate expenses. This is, I don't mind them doing that in a transformation for a 5-year period or a set period. But just generally, they should be talking about what they're doing to transform the
Yeah.
system to make themselves relevant.
No, exactly. And, obviously, somebody,
Yeah, go
Rich.
ahead. I'd much rather talk about them being relevant to students and educating them than always just say, we're doing this to reduce a deficit or to add
Mhm.
revenue. This is, quite frankly, we wouldn't be doing all of this if this was just about the money.
Yep. I agree. I think this language will be comforting to some senators and some House members who really want an accounting, a careful accounting of the transformation. So for that reason, I tried to, go with what they want to do.
Yeah.
I just had to say that, but I would like a sunset in here because, I'm gonna and I
Can we figure out where, Stephanie, we can figure out where to put it, but we're talking about a 10-year switch. So I think we can align it for.
Yeah, Rich,
for the-
So this is a piece of session law, so we can define how long that piece of session law is in effect for, or we can
Okay.
sunset it. And so I'll talk to
Oh,
Becky
okay.
about that as well.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
okay.
Is there a decision that it be 5 or 10?
Well, the strategic plan's for 10 years, so
I think it
Um,
should be 10.
we'll keep it at 10. This kind of transformation is
Yeah.
long-term, and I suspect that the 5 years is still much more to be done.
And just like with the ADEC, if we sunset it in 5 years and then we get in trouble in year 7, it's good to keep our eye on it for a while. So with those changes, that was all I had for the,
Okay. All right, any other comments? So we're keeping we're going to rewrite the accessibility
Yeah.
sentence when we sit down, and probably more efficient to do it offline and come back with a recommendation.
Yeah.
And we'll add a sunset of 10 years for that reporting requirement. And we will get rid of the industry benchmark language that
yeah,
it seems to not, that on the surface, we might not think it means a lot, but based on what Phil has heard, actually represents a very significant workload to do that. Okay. All right. Does that pretty well cover it? Did I miss
Yep.
anything?
no, that was good.
Okay. All right. Then we are through are we through higher ed?
Now we're into workforce development and education.
All right, 602.3.
Yeah. And,
All right, now
Yep.
this is, we're gonna be doing, all right, so this is all a litany of the 20.5 work programs. And I believe they're funded with ARPA.
yeah,
And so we are going to create an ARPA section of the big bill. That's our plan. So I would think, and I think probably before we get into how we're going to, what that bottom line looks like, we need to have a little more discussion about what's out there for workforce related pieces. So I'm going to suggest, because we are, we're getting emails from everybody, so to speak, around workforce, and maybe we should just hold that section open because it ties back to that long list. And we've had some discussion about maybe we're not going to do that entire list. We're going to do some other things because suggestions been made. We should put some money into apprenticeships to help deal with really acute workforce shortages, which would get us into plumbers and electricians, and youth conservation for youth. And so we're going to have to be looking at that workforce bucket kind of in total. So I I'm going to suggest that we hold that for further discussion to make sure we've got everything. Because I think what we're seeing here is the proposal from the state colleges around all their workforce programs that added up to the 20.5, which did include some of the ones that we've talked about, but not necessarily all of them, because we have the LPN in 315. We also did the first year of upskilling,
Mhm.
but not the second
That's
year.
not
And I'm
second.
not sure what these programs are relative to what we were doing in 315 as a second year. Maybe, so we need to kind of crosswalk what we were thinking relative to that 2-year upskilling investment and some of the other ones. So I'm going to suggest that we not go through these one by one now, because we can't look at them individually. We've got to look at
Mhm.
our workforce development piece in a total way.
Yep.
So that will get us through to. It looks to me this is exactly off that list of the 20.5.
It pretty much is, the House language is.
Yeah,
And
okay.
that brings us to section 603, which is the
Yeah.
allied health piece.
And I think this is
This is
standard. Yeah,
So the global commitment is completely out of UVM, and this is the only place where global commitment in higher ed is left. In the allied health, it tends to be a non-issue, but we always have this sort of protection language in sub A. And then in B, we define how they're using the global commitment so that it's clear that it's consistent with the waiver.
okay.
And then in 605, we're at VSAC.
All right,
And
so why don't we move down to 605? I think 603, the allied health, is just standard language that we've had in for a number of years. Now, we've had some, and I guess we need to get clarification on this. Originally, I don't know how back it was, BTC approached economic development about money that they needed for their, not their dental hygiene, but for the dental therapy program. And then we had it, and then we got an email, I thought, from Pat Moulton Powden saying that they were able to secure the money and that they didn't need it. And I just need confirmation, because Senator Sorokin raised it again as something that was needed. And so my last recollection was they asked for it and then they withdrew the request because they were able to find the funding. And so I just bring that up as something we need to confirm. So let's go to 605 then.
I'll send an email out to Pat Moulton Powden to confirm that.
All right. I don't want to close this out, because if I do, well, I don't know how to keep it open, but forget it. It's probably on the bottom. I would go back and check my emails, but I'm pretty sure we got one that said, because we were, do you remember, Stephanie, what bill we were thinking we would put that 300,000 in?
I think it
Was
was
it
in the
last
context
year?
of I think it was in the context of H315 when we did the LPM program. I think they were both initially discussed together, and then the dental therapy one is when we heard that it had funding.
Oh, I thought it was earlier than that.
The other place it would have been a budget adjustment then.
Yeah. Yes, Alice.
What exactly is dental therapy?
It's a new program. Only a handful of states have got it, and it's at a skill level above a dental hygienist.
I see.
A therapist would be able to do some of the procedures that a dentist ordinarily would do, sort of like a physician assistant can do certain procedures. And so it's building on that concept, and it's a program that was pioneered in the state of Minnesota.
I see.
And so
And we
these-
passed the legislation a number of years ago. It's so long ago, we've probably forgotten,
Yeah.
because it's taken that long to get the program set up.
Peg Flory was in the Senate then. I remember her floor speech. But the thing that you should know, Senator Nika, is that a dental therapist cannot practice without a supervising dentist in the practice with them. They can't hang out their shingle on their own.
I see. I think
Same as a physician assistant has to be under the supervision.
So do we need to say dental therapy in this list?
We don't,
Doesn't say it.
under the allied health,
Under B, small b. Yes, little b. Shouldn't we mention that program as well? Just dental hygiene, respiratory therapy, and nursing programs, which graduate 315.
what section, what page are you on?
I'm on page 166 at the bottom, small b as in boy. And they don't say dental therapy there.
That
Well-
be about where the global commitment funds apply.
Yeah,
Shouldn't we say it?
What, we don't know if they're applying global commitment to dental therapy yet.
Oh. Well,
They may in the future, but I don't think that it's contemplated for 22 yet, so.
I don't think so, because program isn't up yet.
oh, it isn't in place yet?
No, I don't think so. I don't think, I think it's close to getting ready to implement, but it's not operational yet, I don't think.
Okay.
And the global commitment amount here hasn't changed, so if we change the amount because they can find a way to apply global commitment, we'll know about that either in budget adjustment or
Yeah,
next year's budget. But it's not contemplated in the global commitment amount that's in this budget in the allied health line yet.
Okay.
which is what this is referencing. Okay. So why don't we go on to VSAC?
So Madam Chair, I'm not sure if, as I mentioned before, I have one request that I'm hoping to forward for an additional appropriation through a piece of VSAC, but I'm not sure it needs language. So that's the Advance Vermont $350,000 request. And I can read what Advance Vermont does if people would like to hear.
Okay, so that's an addition, and it's separate and apart from what VSAC does for their aspiration activities. And this is.
This is on the groundwork in high schools and other places trying to get Vermont to the goal of 70% holding a credential of value by 2025. And they, I think, had another source of funding that dropped out, but they're hoping with this infusion of one-time money, they can get back to funding from other sources.
So this is aspirational.
This is, I don't know if
So
it's,
why wouldn't we use ESSER money? These are to get students, current students in K through 12,
yeah,
right? To think about going on and thinking about either to have aspirations for training or education after graduation from high school.
right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be high school students. It's also, they're
Adults.
they're aiming it toward post-pandemic recovery as well.
Well, it's middle school kids that they really need, that they know they have to start early.
Mm.
I'm just wondering, is this, of course, the Agency of Education wants a fence around that, but it seems to me that this is very much a part of our educational dilemma as we graduate everybody, but we have a very deplorable continuation rate.
Mhm.
Would this be permissible to use ESSER for this?
Well, I think at the agency's discretion,
No, I'm talking about, could we appropriate it, Stephanie?
I'm not sure on this one. When we first talked about it, it was on, I think we've put it on the list for ARPA consideration. I'd want to talk a little bit more about you're talking about ESSER statewide funds. And this
Yeah.
is sort of, it's focused on the post-high school. So I don't know.
Oh, it's post-high school. Oh,
I mean,
okay.
it's doing the work, but it's the focus of what they're trying to is the credentialing after high school, right? So, and what they want the funds for is
it's trying to hit
new
that
and
gap.
comprehensive. Some of it's a system that they're trying in a credential registry.
Prudential registry? Has this been discussed in education?
I don't know.
It was discussed in economic development.
It
Yeah,
was.
and I think education knows about it.
And did economic development take a position on it?
I know that in the past, we've been very supportive of them. I was in and out of committee that day, so I don't want to misspeak for the group. I know that anything that is aligning education and skill sets with jobs that we know have openings, that's one of the parts of the program online, as you can look and see how many jobs are going to be available in a particular industry and subsection. And then you click on it and it says basically where in the state you can get that credential, how many years it would take. It gives you all the information you and your family would need to be able to navigate it. So there isn't currently a tool that does this in this way. So it's very appealing because of that.
Oh, gosh, you would think our Department of Labor would be doing something like that. And who funds it? We don't
So-
make an appropriation to advance Vermont.
So
VSAC.
the McClure Foundation has funded it in for a while. They had agreements with the state college system that helped and in funding this. And so there's a number of sources of funds. And during the pandemic, over the last year, a number of the funding sources have gone away. The thought is that if they can get past this year and next, but particularly this year, that they can rebuild those relationships.
All right. So this, if we agree to this, it really goes more into our workforce development. It goes on that workforce development piece.
Could.
I would think if we're talking about it from linking people up where the labor market needs workers and what those opportunities would be, it seems like, it perhaps is a variation on upskilling and workforce development.
Sure.
So I think we could put that in our bucket for consideration of those that workforce development expended ARPA funded activities.
Okay. Sounds good.
You think ARPA would be all right, Stephanie, on that? You thought?
I think it probably would be.
Okay. Okay. Well, one would think that would be a very significant benefit to aid employers who are going to be needing employees with those skills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and anything that targets that gap between graduation rate and uptake rate in college or for credentials, I think, in lots of different committees, we talk about that piece and how to get those people to nudge forward into completing a credential. And this is really the only organization that's taking that up statewide.
The only thing that is out there is so many of these things get started and it's ad hoc in response. And at what point do we look at them sort of within a in a
Yep.
more in a whole system? So, I mean, I don't mean to appear that I'm not supportive of Advance Vermont, but it's like, well, how did it get started? How do they determine who gets served? What is their focus? Who operates it? How do we evaluate the benefit of the investment? And I'm sure all that information is out there, but we're not a policy committee. So oftentimes we fund things for the best of intentions, but it sometimes, it just adds to sort of the ad hoc kind of approach to
I agree.
budgeting here.
I think of it myself as it's based out of VSAC. And so I think of it as an arm of what VSAC is trying to do in terms of helping low-income Vermonters, first-generation BIPOC community.
Okay.
That's a big part of their focus as well.
Okay. And so it's statewide. In other words, the service is available, the same as VSAC serves. Well, aspirational, though, is more limited in some areas. So I think that it would make sense if we want to put that on to make that part of our workforce development piece of ARPA,
Mhm.
economic development and workforce.
Yeah.
Okay. Was there something else, or do you want to go down through this?
That was the only thing I had here.
Okay.
In section 605.2 is the stipend language, and we will update it. Since we're directly appropriating the stipend now, we'll just do the wordsmithing on this section to reflect that it's not a transfer anymore.
Okay, that dealt with that really cumbersome flow of money.
Yeah.
Are there contingency funds?
So now we're moving into A&R.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an amendment to the Environmental Contingency Fund, adding or changing.
It raises. So it raises it from 100,000 to 350 and to a release, as opposed to cost attributable to each of the subsections of subdivisions of this subsection. Oh, well, the rewrite's clearer. Unless you happen to have off the top of your head the subdivisions of subsection. Do you know what the what's behind this, Stephanie?
I think it was a request from the administration. We have the $10 million, or right now, presumably the $10 million going into the Environmental Contingency Fund. The House and the governor had proposed that, and I think it went with that.
Okay.
Those subsections are all part of that star on the next page.
All right.
Visions of
Alice, do you remember in your conversations anything about this?
I'm just trying to, I'm sorry I had to leave. I have an electrician working here.
Oh, no. We were just on Natural Resources Contingency Fund, and it just changed the language there to up it from 100,000 to 350, and then put it together for a response to a release of a hazardous material. And it got rid of that rather cumbersome language for costs attributable to each of the subdivisions of this subsection.
I don't know. I'd have to.
So I don't know, maybe you could meet different subdivisions within the subsection and get to 350. I have no idea, but
I don't know.
I think the I haven't looked, but I have a feeling it lists the types of hazardous materials and things.
okay.
Well,
it seems like it's an easier rewrite, and I'm sure the cost.
This is the limit by which before they can be used, before they have to come to joint fiscal and seek.
Yeah.
approval.
Okay.
above the
So
left.
we're reducing our workload, Stephanie?
I guess, but it's also, I mean, we do occasionally have, it was a dry cleaner, I think in Rutland several years ago, where the amount was much higher than the $100,000 limit.
Well,
All
I
right,
think,
I can see with the cost and stuff, 350 for some of this remediation is not, I think unless we hear differently, we should close that out.
yeah,
And move on to 709.1.
And then this is just a piece of session law that allocates 5 million of the 10 million that's going into the environmental contingency for the PCB testing in public schools and approved and recognized independent schools.
Okay. And then we'll deal with what the testing shows.
I mean,
Anything on that? We know it's a big issue, certainly after Burlington.
yeah, I mean, given what Burlington is finding in their school, in their high school, and are other schools built around the same time, might they not have the exact same problem? I mean, I guess it'll have to be determined, but
Well, that's what you would test the schools particularly that fall into the, construction. I think it's by date of construction that they would be looking.
Yeah.
so there's
So-
just one question I would have, and that's the very last line. It says public schools and approved and recognized independent schools. Usually, and maybe people made the policy decision here to do it anyway, but usually we don't do anything with the recognized schools,
yeah,
only with the approved independents.
we just heard all about that in judiciary.
Exactly. And so we might want to consult briefly with education about that piece.
Okay.
So,
And because you're concerned about the
Recognized.
recognized.
Yeah.
Yes.
And, I think testing is good, but there's a finite amount of money and we don't usually have any legal liability or state money going to those operations. So,
so would the recognized take it beyond like Linden and St. John's?
It would.
yeah, because there are some places that they basically notify the state they're setting up shop. They're not inspected, nothing really, no interaction with the state except a general approval that they can go ahead.
Right.
And approved schools, obviously, greater oversight and they get state dollars. So,
So-
Recognized now, one example is Kern Hatton, which the education department has nothing to do with anymore.
right.
So, unless they were to go in and do an abuse or
Could
neglect.
it be any private school like Putney School or?
A lot of the
First-
private schools are approved.
Those privates are approved, if they're approved, but a recognized school has really, I
All
could
right.
get,
Well, why don't we, in light of you bringing up what recognized means, let us see whether we want to delete that
Yeah.
that group.
If we could
And
just
just-
ask the education committee to give us an opinion on
Okay.
it. Stephanie,
Yeah,
you're probably busy. Why don't I send Brian Campion an email now?
and
sure. Or I can do it. I turned my video off because I was getting an unstable
Okay.
notice. That's the only reason I turned my video off.
Jane, if you'd like, I can do that now.
Philip, it would be good to mention the definition that Jim Damaris gave us in judiciary.
Okay. Will do.
And what were you, because you were taking up the issue of Kern Hatton?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I think, yes, we should actually get confirmation. Also,
I don't know if we did recognize schools with the lead testing 2 years ago or not.
I don't think so. I think we just
No.
did approved.
So why don't we look at that language and make it consistent, what we did for lead testing?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure recognized, because recognized is never included in anything. That's
Well, I
kind of
wonder who drafted this.
seems like it was the administration.
I do think it came over from the administration with the $10 million, because that was in their original proposal.
Okay.
So the 10 million into the environmental contingency fund and the half going to this PCB effort.
All right. Well, I think we better check on that.
Okay, I'm writing to Brian right now.
Okay.
That's
we
the
have-
end of ENR, and now
Yeah.
we're moving into the sort of ACCD part of the budget. And the
Well-
only section of language here is on VHFA for the weatherization piece that's in the one-time money in the bill. And that it's in the ARPA money in the House passed bill. It was in general fund in the governor's recommend. And there's $18 million of weatherization. I believe 9 of it is going through VHFA. And so
Oh, are we going to, isn't
Hey,
this tying
Cooper.
into what natural resources is going to be giving us?
it is. And so this is an amendment that came with the governor's money because it was an amendment to statute to allow them to, the VHFA to have the program.
Okay,
So
well,
we can incorporate, it just has to be the statutory amendment. If you want it to go on, we can either not withstand the statute or do this amendment to allow the weatherization or something.
Okay.
So
well, without knowing exactly what we're getting back from natural resources, and what's the deadline on that, Rich?
It's all done, and Chris has it, and should is ready to send it over.
Okay, so do you know about the nexus with this language here? Is it necessary? Was it included? Is it?
Let me text Chris right now and see what he says.
it was in the version previous that you guys
It
were
was in
supporting.
the previous version.
This chunk
And
of
it-
weatherization through VHFA was supported by the community
Okay,
funding.
Then
and
it should be.
therefore- Then we would need that language then.
And we would probably, the question is, do we pull it out of this section and put it where the money is as well? Just so
Yeah,
that-
we're going to
yeah.
have to, if we're putting all the ARPA together, we've got to pull anything that's
all the
scattered all
related
over the
pieces,
place.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I guess it sounds like it's going to be part of that replacement package that's coming over from natural resources. That's going to create a special fund. Is that still the plan, Rich?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So now we're down to transportation. That's just town highway aid program. That was under discussion, so that needs to just be held till we get through the T-bill. Because I'm not sure if that is that the, we may change if it's that $3 million that the House
Yeah.
took.
So I have a note from Chris Roop that we want to actually take this section out because of what you're,
Yeah,
that you're going to do instead of 3 million one-time aid split between.
we're
the two.
doing 3 million, but we're doing it for class 2 roadway and structures.
So I think this, consistent with what you're going to be recommending, this comes out.
Yes, it does.
Yep. And now we're at the last section of the bill, which is the second year of the Pay Act.
Yeah. And I did get an email from Senator White, and they've reviewed it, taken testimony, and they concur with what the House did. They've looked at it. And so this is to fully fund Pay Act. And
We do have a few technical corrections to make. I think the Secretary of Human Services ended up at something like a $15,000 pay instead of $115,000 pay.
Nice.
You'll see that.
You saved some cash.
oh, you Mike Smith is running half of state government for 15,000.
I think there's one other technical typo type correction to this part of the bill as well. I just can't remember what it is off the top of my head.
Okay. All right, so normally we rely on our GovOps committee to look at the Pay Act, and this just fully funds the second year of the Pay Act. We only funded the first year. Last year, everything was so tenuous. So.
And it would be after this section that we would sort of reconstruct and pull all the ARPA funding into what we call a G section of the bill, where you start to create your ARPA structure of what you're going to appropriate.
Okay. And then effective dates?
Those will
Would be-
move to an H section. Those will always
H
be the last
section.
section of the bill.
Okay. Well, before we get done, we're going to be over 200 pages then.
Probably, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Although you single space, so you might be a lot less pages than the House.
Oh, good. All right. So we've gone through the language. And Stephanie, you've kept a list then of all the ones that we've got to go back and close out, because the more we get of these closed out.
And I have a small stack of sort of small questions answered that we haven't returned to.
Okay.
That we could sort of run through if you wanted to do that.
Yes, that would be good. Thank you.
Let me find my stack of.
Are we still going to be working in the language piece?
It's probably a combination of the language. There's probably a handful that are number pieces.
Okay.
Let me get the right stack of numbers of paper out. It's that time of year where you're just organized stacks of. So one of the questions that was raised last week was in the audit TIF language. And someone had asked, how often do the TIFs get audited? And Graham says it's every 5 years is what we do on a normal cycle.
Okay. Is that prescribed in statute, or is that just more procedural?
He did not answer that question. I didn't ask him that.
Oh, forget it. Forget it.
I don't know if it's in statute or if it's, the way the TIF is arranged. There was a question about, way back at the beginning of the language, sections 103, E103, and a section E105. E103s were these insurance sections, and it was an added piece of language about maintaining up-to-date appraisals. And that is because we have to do that for our insurance purposes.
Okay.
That's
All
why
right.
that was being added. And then we had section E105, and people can scroll all the way back to near the beginning of the bill for that one, where there was language added about the strategic plan from ADS. And it was.
Oh, yes, right. They were
so-
supposed to do a biennial, and then they were supposed to do an annual with the budget.
The new language, the new sentence that was being added to do it annually, concurrent with the budget, was meant to, they were meant to strike out the first sentence and replace it with the annual sentence. So that's, it just didn't happen in the formatting when it came to us.
Oh, but
So-
didn't we get an email from the secretary who was concerned that we would have that it somehow would maybe not get ahead of the budget, and therefore it was only good for a couple of weeks or something?
Yeah. The language was inserted to change the date of the strategic plan to be on or after the governor's budget speech. But the budget speech is annual. And so it was meant to replace tell us the plan every other year. And so they added the new sentence, but they forgot to strike through what they were replacing.
Okay, that's why it just didn't make sense. Because
Didn't
it
make
didn't
any
strike it.
sense.
But the question I have is, normally it's referencing a strategic plan. And it seems to me that if you're talking about, you don't do a strategic plan every 12 months. So are we really talking about sort of an update or on the strategic plan as opposed to an annual strategic plan? Where did this come from?
It's actually requested by Secretary Quinn.
It was,
yeah.
okay.
And I imagine that they don't the strategic plan doesn't get done or updated every year, but you do sort of refer to it, and you may do small amendments to it as you go through. It's not the strategic plan doesn't necessarily.
So what
could
you read the replacement sentence, please, Stephanie?
Replacement sentence is: the secretary shall prepare and submit a strategic plan for information technology and cybersecurity concurrent with the governor's annual budget request required under 32 VSA section 306.
I think the thing that I find, I'm not sure that what they want to present is really a strategic, like a new strategic plan, but it's more like, what are they, I think what I would find particularly helpful is how the governor's recommended proposals connect to the a strategic plan.
Well, you're amending a section of statute that is reporting records and review requirements for ADS.
Mm-hmm.
And that in that section of statute, there is the first two words, strategic plan period, and then it says biannually on or before January 15th, the secretary shall prepare and submit a strategic plan for information technology and cybersecurity. And then it goes on, it started out, but the strategic
well,
plan.
if they want to, if they want to do a strategic plan, or if whatever they want to do is an annual plan and call it a strategic plan, at this point, I'm not quarreling over it. It just seems like it
may be that cybersecurity does require a different time frame.
Oh, I'm not
approach.
quarreling about the time frame. I am just, it's more defining what they're doing on an annual basis as a strategic plan. It seems to me more it's an annual update, but on a plan. If they like it, far be it from me to change. But in reality, they're not doing a new strategic plan every year.
Yeah,
which is a very time-consuming and a complex process. So, all right, well.
So we will strike what should have been struck when they did this amendment.
All right. Yeah, that was the most confusing part, was because of the annual and biennial in the same section. All right. Anything else that you found the answer to?
There are a few things.
The meaning of life.
Put the money ones aside for the moment. There was a question, well, this is a money one, but there's $300,000 of general fund to the Human Rights Commission on a one-time basis.
Mm-hmm.
And that it's for a special litigation fund. They anticipate cases that they might be needing the dollars for. They did this instead of creating new permanent positions. So it's one-time money.
I know, because of base pressure. What is it you need to know?
You had just had a question on it. You wanted to know.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't very well described what the 300 was for. It was simply an appropriation for $300,000.
Okay. All right.
And that was the question that was raised.
Okay, so it does help with the litigation.
Yeah.
Why don't you let me ask the question about the 300, and I'll get back to you tomorrow. It's very limited what they can do with the one-time funds, because there's a whole set of things that make the one-time funds very difficult for them to use. So let me ask.
And these are general funds. They're not ARPA dollars.
It doesn't matter if they're general funds. You need attorneys for privacy reasons and a continuity of people doing the work that make it difficult. That's why they asked for created positions. So let me ask.
Well, just for respecting jurisdiction, that's Bobby's section, Human Rights Commission. Oh, I know that you're probably getting information from one of the commission members, but
Yes, I am.
on the other hand, and I
I'm-
know that probably the original request was they would like base funding for an additional attorney. And we can put it down, but then the question is what we don't fund with base money. We did do a position to the commission a couple of years ago to expand their staffing. I think that this is the question is, if you can't do base, which the House determined they couldn't, is this better than saying, well, sorry, there's nothing here?
Right, that's exactly the question.
And that to me is what, we've got to get some statement from.
Right.
And
I hate to appropriate the money and have it just sit there because it really isn't, doesn't fit in them getting the job done.
well, I think I just think as a matter of and I know Bobby isn't here.
I'll have Boar reach out to Bobby.
Either that or Stephanie or Chrissy can shoot her an email saying we're considering the 300,000 one time. Obviously, finding ongoing base funding is a challenge. If the preference is the base can't be located, would you still be able to use the one-time money, or would you prefer that we don't do anything, I guess is it.
Yeah, I think that would probably be best.
All right. And I think because you are connected to someone on the commission, that it's better to respect the committee, the budget section assignment. And
I'm happy.
we will have a memo drafted from, I don't know if Bobby will be back or Joint Fiscal can send it. I can send it. I'll send it with a copy to Bobby. All right. So Stephanie and Chrissy, maybe we can work up a draft and just ask the question. If we can only give you this 300,000, is it and can't respond to the base, is it really workable, or would you recommend something else other than
some smaller amount of one-time money that you can actually utilize?
Right.
Okay. We'll follow up with Boar on that one.
All right.
There was a question, now we're going sort of into small, these were triggered off of money line items. So one of them was the renter rebate, which was a flat appropriation of 9.5 consistent with last year. And the question was raised, did we restructure the program? And we did restructure the program. So it's a household-based program. And the estimate was done sort of pre-pandemic. And so we could be actually a little bit over appropriated in renter rebate potentially for FY22 because of pandemic impacts. The renter assistance, the pieces that are count toward income in this household income may drive down the demand,
also, you can't get a rebate for the months in which another program paid the rent.
Yeah.
And so with many millions of dollars going out in rental assistance, the general thinking is that it's going to reduce the rebates that these renter households receive.
We don't know for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
pre-pandemic, we thought it was going to, the restructure was going to start to step up the cost a little bit. And so.
Right. And that'll probably be out there once the
once we
rental
get past
assistance.
this, yeah.
But so what So in the absence of anything certain other than uncertainty, we're just holding it
Cloud
constant.
appropriation seems appropriate.
Yeah, okay. I think that's probably right, because there's no basis to alter what is the current appropriation. Okay.
There was a question on the workers' comp line in the Secretary of Administration, which was going up from 600 and something to 900.
Yeah.
So it's substantial, but it's not quite the explanation of that change is it's not really an apples to apples comparison year to year. There's what's reflected there is the non-demand side, not the demand, not the claims driven side. And so they're in the process of issuing a new third party request for information. And in doing that, they found that there were some things that were counted on the claims and the demand side that should be on the non-demand side. And so it's basically truing up what shows that the cost isn't new, but what's showing up in this appropriation is new from the internal service fund on the workers' comp. That's why you see that significant change.
All right, so that's in Agency of Administration.
Yeah.
Jane,
Okay.
Becca, Jane, Becca,
That's your section of the budget, Philip. Agency of Administration.
Yeah.
So if somebody asks you that question on the floor, Stephanie will email you what she just gave you, because she must have gotten it from them.
perfect. I'm supposed to tell you Becca got lost
Bumped off.
reception, bumped off, so she's trying her best to get back on. But
Okay. So I'm sure, Stephanie, you got that information from around the UI, the workers' comp expenditure changing so much, or appropriation changing so much. So just forward it to Philip. So if anybody asks on the floor, he'll be prepared.
Okay.
I will read it verbatim.
Right.
And everyone will scratch their head.
I doubt that you will, but
You
how
had a
did
question. Sorry.
when this big bill got brought out to the House last year, I did the entire budget. What did the House do this year?
Oh, they had people report their sections of the bill, I think.
For how long?
All day.
As long as it takes,
All day.
I don't know.
All day.
Yeah, they're okay with that. They'll sit forever.
Okay. All right. Did we get a definition of state place students in terms of education?
Oh, I did look that up on the, I'll grab it again and pull it in. There is in the budget book a definition.
Okay.
And so I will, and I meant to double check that with Mark and see if he had a more clear way to say it.
Okay.
And I'll finish.
All right.
I don't have that one in my stack right now, but yes, I'll follow up on that one. You
Okay.
had a question on $5,600, $5,600 that was added by the House in the A&R pilot line. And there were 8 parcels of land that were originally, the pilot payment was going to come out of the Clean Water Fund, but that's really not the use of that. So the pilot payment should be out of the pilot fund. So it just got accounted for in the wrong spot when these parcels came on into state ownership. So
Okay. All right.
Numbers that D, one of those D numbers?
it's B701. So it's in the money, it's in the web report part of the budget
Okay.
where you saw 5635 or something like that being added.
And we thought it was probably other new lands.
Yeah.
Okay. So all it is the 5,600 in pilot got charged to the wrong fund.
Yeah, so the lands were acquired or accumulated because of clean water projects.
Yeah, probably, or they might be riparian rights, those kinds of things.
So I don't know exactly this, what type of the size.
Something for 5,600, Stephanie, I don't really want you to spend a lot more time.
Okay. You had also asked on all the pension, I think I mentioned this, that all the pension lines that are out of the pension trust, the various pension trust funds, those do pay for the investment fees. They do pay for the administration of the pension programs, and that includes overhead
Okay.
costs. And you will probably be getting a memo from the treasurer who would like to split out all the pension administration into one single line item in the treasurer's office. We don't know that that's really possible right now in the budget, but maybe in the cycle of the budget adjustment. It's a budget structure request that she has. You'll probably get a memo on it. We told her that we didn't think it was probably something you could do right now in this budget cycle because it's a little bit of, bureaucratically involved, moving a lot of pieces around. It'd be better to do it through either the budget adjustment process or the next budget cycle.
Okay. We've got enough to do with this one, that's for sure, without getting into restructuring sections of the budget. And also, I was just wondering about the status of the language to get us started on pre-funding of the OPEB for teachers.
So we have, I think Steve was working on a draft of that language. We have a memo from Chris Roof. I don't know, we haven't sent it out to the committee yet. Would you like to do that tonight, or do you want to?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll put that memo out so people can see that. And Steve was working on, what language would come in to accomplish that.
Okay. And that is to pay so that we are formally addressing the problem of that health care for teachers right now upon their retirement. So we're providing a benefit, but we never start a pre-funded like we are for pensions for that benefit. So that is beginning to make some progress on that OPEB pressure.
Obviously the retirement workforce piece, whether it goes in this bill or stays in a separate bill, the idea of this sort of initial start pre-funding on the teachers OPEB would be folded into, a more permanent plan for pre-funding as a result of the task force. You kind of want to align those pieces, but this would start with at least the teachers' estimated normal cost under a given set of parameters, which are, equivalent set of parameters to the pension normal cost calculation.
Okay, we've talked about it. It's just, I was wondering about the language that would actually do it.
It's
under
in
development.
Yeah.
Okay. Other things on our list?
We did get a response on the mobile crisis unit, which is funded in the House budget with $1.2 million of general fund to cover 2 years. We did get a response from Sarah Squirrel on the detail of that proposal. At this point, and I think we've talked about this already, we're not ready to move it into Medicaid, but we will be drafting the language to target so that we can move it into Medicaid.
Although the material that she sent me is based on that higher Medicaid match. So I can't imagine that they would be inherent in that plan. I just sent that to you. You wouldn't be counting on a Medicaid match if you're designing a program that isn't eligible for a Medicaid match. So I think in some ways our language may not be, well, probably won't do any harm to make it very clear that any program is going to be designed so it is eligible, particularly since that there's going to be that enhanced match for mobile crisis. But I asked, we had a lot of discussion around this and the equity in terms of why Rutland, what about other areas of the state, what this really means, if it's evidence-based intervention, what it would cost for a statewide rollout, assuming that the pilot proved itself worthy of scaling out. And I think the total cost was about 800,000 or 900,000 general fund to go statewide. But that's assuming that that's based on Medicaid match. So so at this point, it's general fund, but when that new
The
match
idea is-
kicks in, comes in when? It's not 2 years out.
Next year is when it would, it wouldn't be for the full 22. It starts, I think, next March, I believe. So it'd be a quarter of 22. So the idea would be to fully fund in state dollars, the Rutland pilot to begin.
For 3/4.
For 3/4 or for the full year. So that, I mean, you do have a little, there might be a lag time, you know.
Okay.
But that higher match is available for 3 years.
Okay.
Under the ARPA language.
Okay.
And then the last piece, you've had a lot of
So
discussion.
what we're going to do then is reduce the general fund down to 1 year,
Yeah.
knowing now that starting next March, that Medicaid match will be available, that enhanced match, and then can pick it up for next fiscal year. So we're doing a full year without a Medicaid match, and then knowing that.
Yeah, and it may move around, you know, as for that last quarter, but also I would expect in the budget build for 23, you may be hearing if it's going to expand.
Okay.
You know, beyond the Rutland pilot.
Okay.
If we're clear that the pilot leads to proposals for more state, if not fully statewide, you know, other state ready to go type.
Yeah, well, it was interesting in terms of what we're looking at and the data that came out. Did we send that out to everybody? I mean, there's so much information for people to absorb, but it really gave a sense of the experience in Rutland, why it is so much greater than other areas of state of children ending up in the emergency rooms.
And I don't know if that's I'll find it and send it to Chrissy. I know it came Sunday. I think I got it from you on Sunday.
Yeah, I forwarded it to you because I thought you would be interested in knowing that in fact they were calculating the cost, assuming the Medicaid match, which made me feel comfortable that they were designing a program that would qualify. So, all right, so 1 year, so that frees up a second year of general fund.
And so those were sort of the smaller questions, and I will get the state place student definition out to you as well.
Okay.
There's still probably several, I have to flip back through my scratch sheet. There's still several sections that are open. We're working on the clean water construct.
Okay. The scale down.
Yeah.
Ramp up, slope down, or whatever.
You had a question mark just holding open E 100.6, which was the Fish and Wildlife and Liquor body camera deployment, even though there's no money, additive money in the budget. You didn't have a specific question, it was just leaving it open.
I think we better leave it open until Senator Sears comes back.
Yeah.
Bill, you're muted.
Oh, I was saying I do find myself wondering why liquor needs the body cams.
I think Senator Sears was saying he had concluded that that wasn't really a that the need wasn't there, that just the
Yeah.
nature of their job was so different from other law enforcement.
Yeah, fish and
Um,
wildlife for sure, but
Uh-huh. You know, we've had an interesting, I was appointed to a study on law enforcement retirement. And of course, there were a number of positions that come under law enforcement, a certified law enforcement officer. And so in some ways, liquor lottery raises that question because the Attorney General's office and Medicaid fraud are investigators that fall under law enforcement. And I think OPR may have some. So it's not everybody that has that law enforcement actually has job duties that lend themselves to the camera necessarily. So I think Senator Sears was basically saying he wasn't convinced that cameras were necessary for those investigators.
I think Chris Winters should wear a camera.
Well, what about the Secretary of State?
No, Chris can just follow Jim.
Oh, okay.
And-
All right.
We'll have Jim Cam.
Well,
Chris-
we'll write that in.
Yeah, Chris and I were on a call this morning and we noted that we now both have the same haircut.
There
So
you go.
his hair's grown so long. Yeah.
I know, and Jim Demaray is getting
Yeah.
quite lengthy too.
Everybody's lagging Jim.
I think so. Other areas, Stephanie?
So
Otherwise-
Senator Starr was going to follow up on the veterans question, whether or not the parade still happens. You had
Yes,
that
and he
with-
told me that he did follow up, and right now they're hoping that they can have it. And it was a modest amount of money. And so he,
$5,000.
yeah, so
Oh,
we
no,
decided,
$7,500. Sorry.
we'd leave it in and be hopeful
Yeah.
that there could be a parade this year.
And tomorrow I should have a first draft of the Center for Crime Victims study language, adding in the other entities that rely on the fees, as well as that you had wanted in the 911 special fund study, you had wanted to reference the PEG report from last year.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So those two drafts will come to you tomorrow.
Okay.
The other pieces that are open are, the areas around childcare. There's some, language that goes with the money that's in the bill with childcare. The language around emergency housing. Those are the main sort of just open sections to be.
You're talking about the language around the work group for DCF?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm still waiting on the commissioner for that language.
Okay, I knew that that's underway. Fortunately,
I called Jeffrey Pippinger this morning, and we've gone back and forth, but haven't been able to connect. They promised me they'd be back before tomorrow.
okay. So there are a couple of other, well, obviously there are a number of bills. Health and welfare has got several. One is the child care bill, H171, that has got to come to us. And I spoke to Senator Lyons today. They also they were meeting this afternoon. They have to put together their list of, what they would hope that we might be able to fund in the budget. I think many of them are probably the same areas that we've talked about. And then there's the bill around the expansion of Dr. Dinosaur. And I asked her if, if they're going to get that out. And we would move that bill separately and put the appropriation into the budget. And then the other is the universal breakfast S100. We had pulled out the funding for general fund that was supporting local foods and so forth. When they rewrote the amendment to limit it to universal breakfast, they put back in the funding that we had pulled out to deal with in the budget. And so I had written Jim Demaray and the chairs of the committees to say, just because we're scaling back on universality doesn't mean we're revisiting the appropriations that were removed. So we have to look at that whole issue around locally produced foods.
Right.
They were proposing of using the schools. The other, which we did send out, and that is another variation on creating markets for local produced foods, and that was the food bank request that they've had, which would be really a base request, but it could be something shorter term, and to purchase local foods for distribution through the state's food shelf system. I just want to let you know, I hoping that the amendment that finally comes just deals with the universal breakfast piece, because I really it would be rather awkward, and no one's mentioned to us when they asked about the revised approach that they were reinserting that other funding that we had stripped out when the bill came to appropriations. So I'm hoping that we can get that resolved, but it still, we have a number of bills that carry money that we're going to have to consider when we do the budget. And the other part that I would say is that right now, and of course, this is something that is very important to the governor, and H315 was signed, and we did move some ARPA funding in that bill. And that is, when we do this big bill, as Stephanie said, we're creating an ARPA section so that it's very clear how that ARPA money is being appropriated. It's not scattered around. Now, the capital bill, when it came from the House, actually appropriated in the capital bill 30 million of ARPA. I spoke to the chair of our institutions, and he was reluctant to change what the House did. But if our plan is to create an ARPA section, then to have something scattered of ARPA related in the capital bill works counter to that. And so we're going to have to wait for the capital bill and make that change.
Jane, could we just account for that in ours?
No, we do not normally do appropriations in the capital bill. That's bonding.
No, I don't mean do it there. I just mean as a reference note that the capital bill has 30 million in ARPA funding.
No.
Okay.
No. We're doing appropriations all in one place.
Okay.
And I'm not sure that, to allocate 30 million in that bill when we're already trying to look at what we're obligating now out of that 2 or 3 years of ARPA use seems a bit getting ahead of the process.
So one thing I would just note, Jane, I know you just did it inadvertently, but the governor actually did not sign 315. He let it.
What did I say? He let it become law without his signature.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
So because he wrote us that letter, you don't want to forget about that letter we got.
A very stern letter.
Very stern letter about how I don't want it to pass in the law, but I won't veto it because there's actually stuff I want.
Yeah, but you did more than I wanted you to do. And the other part, which obviously our discussion and how we're talking about the use of this unrestricted ARPA money, is the letter references, and I'm defining ARPA as infrastructure. And infrastructure means the things that I'm defining as infrastructure. But the federal ARPA plan is not limited to infrastructure. It has many parts, as we know, including the UI benefits, to the Medicaid match rates, to assistance for childcare. It's all over the map. So to say that one piece of this very massive federal legislation is only to be used for infrastructure is putting at a state level constraints on the funding that it was never intended, I don't think, when Congress passed it. So we have got use of ARPA that is beyond what is in that proposal, and some of it was in H315. And that would be certainly the workforce piece and the upskilling. And then, of course, we're dealing with ARPA for our state colleges to help support and stabilize them and support the transformation plan. So I'm sorry, I did not mean to say he signed it. He signed the letter to
He signed the letter, yes.
saying he's
To
signing it. He's not signing it, but he's not stopping it because, frankly, the link up language on taxes, to hold that up even more, you can imagine thousands of Vermont taxpayers are waiting to get their refunds or to file their returns. And I'm sure every tax preparer in the world is also equally as anxious. So, and the business grants were part of that as well. So there were, I guess there were enough.
Well-balanced package, Jane.
What?
It was a well-balanced package.
Yeah, we thought so.
Yeah.
We thought so. So, in some ways, the budget that we're building is a broader utilization of the ARPA funds than what was being proposed. So the capital bill still got to come to us, and I'm just letting you know. The other question I have, Stephanie, and that has to do with the 113 million for capital.
Yeah,
Is there-
okay.
My question is, do we have anything that we've identified that would fall potentially or in very high likelihood could fall into that bucket? Because we don't have instructions on that, but we don't have actually Treasury guidance on anything.
No, not definitive guidance. We have what's in the letter of the ARPA law.
Yeah.
And then you do have an allocation of dollars of that $113 million pot in the capital bill as it came out of the House.
Yeah, but it didn't even, it made it more narrow than what was permissible under the law.
Yeah, so nothing actually appropriates any of those dollars, those $113, I believe.
Now, my question is,
Yeah.
if I wanted to appropriate any of it,
Yeah.
To address anything that might be eligible here, we haven't really talked about it, but we could.
You could, in the absence of appropriation or explicit grant acceptance in legislation, it will have to go through the JFC grant acceptance process.
Yeah, okay.
So your ability to accept that grant on conditions will be there.
Yeah. All right, well, that'll be another challenge, won't it?
I'll double check whether the language of the capital bill actually is construed as acceptance of the grant.
Well, if it is, it's all coming out. That is not appropriate in a capital bill. I don't think. It seems like that's not where we're accepting grants in a capital bill.
So or it actually sets up a condition, and so I think that's you need to decide sort of the approach that you want for accepting the grant, and what you want in legislation versus
Yeah,
the
well,
normal
we
grant
pulled out the
acceptance
language on
process.
acceptance for homeowners as well.
Yes, that'll have to go through the same process.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I was just wondering if, anticipating if there were some areas of where we might want to, assuming, or even contingent upon permissibility, but that's not a discussion for right now, I don't think, because I'm not sure that we have anything here that would come under that capital framework. But the thing is, we have so many, like the childcare, that 29 million that Richie was talking about, that has to be committed. is that coming down through a debt ID? Is that a grant? How is that coming down?
I'll look at the detail. I think that's childcare development. That's the childcare development block grant, a portion of it.
Okay.
I'll-
I assumed
that
it
would
might be.
Probably run on the same CFDA number and would
And
not
we-
go through grant
and we-
acceptance process.
And we don't have to commit the whole 29, but we have to commit half of it by December.
The point is, Rich, if it comes down through the childcare block grant,
Right,
it doesn't go through joint fiscal, and it could be just an excess federal receipt.
Yeah. that's
Yes,
true.
So we
but-
don't,
but,
I mean-
but the question would be, they're just coming out with a list from the administration. There's no position from the House on how to allocate that half. Do we want to allocate it in this bill? Do we want to set up a
well,
process?
if we don't
that brings-
allocate it in this bill, they will get it anyway because it's coming through an existing financial federal financial account. And the administration, if we don't do anything, can then use the money for the block grant and, as they define.
So we need to check on that because the way it was described to me was it's 29 million increase and we had to do something.
All right, well, we have a lot of grants that increase and they flow through. And so not all of them necessarily require joint fiscal approval. Many of them do, but some of them don't, depending on, like Medicaid, for example, an enhanced matched kind of thing. So we need to check on that. Have you had any discussion on that at all, Stephanie?
I'm sorry. You're asking something about enhanced match?
No, I was talking about the childcare, 29 million. Have you received any communication from DCF or Sarah?
I have not, but I can check in with them if they're starting to formulate a plan of how they would allocate the dollars.
Well,
Okay.
they have a plan on how to allocate the dollars. It's just come out. I've seen the plan. So
And then where the authority to spend the dollars would be, you would be adding it to this bill to the extent that they were authority needed in FY22.
yes,
Well, so you think they do need, all right,
well, the way it was presented to me is they have a list and they needed the list approved. And I didn't get into the details around what that was, but and some of the things that are in the list are quite difficult. So anyways, as soon as we get off this call, I will be on the phone to the commissioner's office.
okay, all right. Anything else? It's 3:00. I'm gonna,
Obviously, the remaining big chunks of language and money are the ARPA pieces that you'll be eventually.
You do have
Adding-
everything from natural resources now.
I do, and I did get it earlier in the weekend.
okay. Well, I'm thinking it's after 3. We've gotten quite a few things closed out, or at least information back. I'm going to suggest we adjourn the committee for today.